any army. Imagine this, a city that ruled half the known world. But inside that same city, invisible hands were pulling every string. Emperors came and went, some lasted years, others barely survived months. Yet somehow, the system never truly collapsed overnight. That's your first clue. Because when power looks unstable on the surface, but survives underneath, it means someone else is holding it together. At first, people believed Rome was controlled by its emperors, men like Julius Caesar, Augustus. Narrow names that sound like absolute power. But here's the truth most people miss. Every one of these men depended on forces behind them. No emperor ruled alone. The moment an emperor lost support from these hidden powers, he didn't just lose his throne, he lost his life. So who were these forces? Start with the Senate. On the surface, they looked like politicians debating laws, but behind closed doors, they were something else entirely. These were elite families, dynasties that had wealth older than the empire itself. They didn't need crowns, because they controlled the men who wore them. They funded campaigns, built alliances, spread rumors, and destroyed reputations. If an emperor stepped out of line, the Senate didn't argue, they replaced him. But even the Senate wasn't the deepest layer. Because there was something far more dangerous. The Praetorian Guard. These were supposed to be the emperor's personal protectors, the most loyal soldiers in Rome. But power changes people. Over time, they realized something terrifying. The man they were guarding was also their biggest weakness. If they controlled the emperor, they controlled Rome. And once they understood that, everything changed. The Praetorian Guard didn't just protect emperors, they chose them. They assassinated rulers who didn't serve their interests and installed new ones who would obey. At one point, they literally auctioned the Roman Empire to the highest bidder. Think about that for a second. The greatest empire in the world, sold like an item in a marketplace. That's not power in public. That's control in the shadows. And still, even this wasn't the full picture. Because behind politics and military force, there was another layer, money. Wealthy elites, merchants, and financial backers who never appeared in history books controlled the flow of resources. Armies don't march without money. Cities don't survive without grain. Wars don't happen without funding. These hidden financiers decided which campaigns succeeded and which ones failed before a single sword was drawn. They didn't need titles, because they owned the system itself. And then there were secret networks, alliances you were never meant to see. Powerful families marrying into each other, forming bloodlines that lasted generations. They didn't think in years, they thought in centuries. While emperors fought for survival, these families played the long game. They influenced decisions quietly, never taking credit, never taking blame, always staying in control. This is why Rome feels so mysterious even today. Because when you look at its history, things don't always make sense. Strong emperors fall suddenly. Weak leaders rise out of nowhere. Policies change overnight. Wars begin without clear reason. That's not chaos, that's hidden control. And here's the darkest part. The people of Rome never truly knew who ruled them. They cheered for emperors, feared soldiers, and respected senators, but the real controllers stayed invisible. They didn't want recognition. They didn't want fame, because the moment power becomes visible, it becomes a target. Real power stays hidden, and that's exactly how Rome was controlled. So next time you hear about the greatness of the Roman Empire, ask yourself this question. Was it really the emperors who built it, or the unseen forces who used them like pieces on a board? Because history doesn't always lie, but it never tells the full truth either. And just when you think you've uncovered the real controllers of Rome, the story goes even deeper, because power in Rome wasn't just about control. It was about survival. Every shadow player knew one brutal truth. If you don't control the game, you become part of it. This is why betrayals in Rome were not rare, they were normal. A senator could smile in public and sign your death in private. A general could swear loyalty and switch sides overnight. Even the Praetorian Guard, the kingmakers themselves, were constantly playing against each other. No one trusted anyone, because everyone had something to gain. And that's what made Rome so dangerous, not its enemies outside, but the silent war happening inside. Think about this. Some emperors didn't fall because they were weak. They fell because they were too strong. The moment an emperor started thinking independently, stopped listening to the Senate tried to control the guard or limit the influence of elites. That was the moment he became a threat, and threats in Rome were never tolerated. Poison in wine, whispers in corridors, secret meetings in the dark, and suddenly, a ruler who seemed untouchable was gone. Replaced, erased, forgotten. But here's where it gets even more chilling. Sometimes, the emperor himself was just a puppet, a face for the public, a symbol for the people, while the real decisions were made elsewhere. In private rooms, behind locked doors, among men whose names history barely remembers. They didn't need statues or glory, because they controlled those who got them. And this system, this invisible machine of power, is what kept Rome alive for centuries. Not strength, not unity, but control, a balance of fear, influence, money, and manipulation. Whenever one force became too powerful, the others pushed back. If the Senate gained too much control, the military stepped in. If the military became dangerous, elites cut their funding. If emperors tried to dominate everything, they didn't last long. It was a constant game, a deadly equilibrium, where everyone was powerful, but no one was safe. And that's the secret most people never realize. Rome didn't collapse because it was weak. It collapsed because the shadows became too crowded. Too many players, too many agendas, too much hidden control. The balance broke. Trust disappeared completely. And once that happened, even the strongest empire in the world couldn't hold itself together. So when you ask who really controlled Rome behind the scenes, the answer isn't just one name. It was a network, a system of hidden power, where senators, soldiers, elites, and unseen influencers all played their part. Sometimes working together, sometimes destroying each other, but always staying in the shadows. And maybe that's the most unsettling truth of all, because systems like that don't just exist in ancient Rome. They exist anywhere power is too big, too valuable, and too dangerous to be left in plain sight. So the real question is not just who controlled Rome. The real question is, how much of that system still exists today? And now, you're standing at the edge of the truth, the part history never clearly says out loud. Because once you understand how Rome was really controlled, one final question hits harder than anything else. What if Rome never actually lost that system? Think about it. Empires fall, names disappear, borders change, but systems of power, they evolve. The same tactics, control from the shadows, using leaders as faces, controlling money, influence, and fear. These are not ancient ideas. These are timeless strategies. Rome didn't invent them, but it perfected them to a level the world had never seen before. And here's what makes this even more intense. The people who mastered that system didn't just vanish. Powerful families didn't suddenly become powerless. Networks don't just disappear overnight. Influence doesn't die, it shifts, it hides, it adapts. Rome may have fallen in the eyes of history, but its methods, its mindset, its way of controlling everything without being seen, that never truly ended. That's why when you look at history after Rome, things start to feel familiar. Different empires, same patterns.